Richard Mollet, Chief Executive of the Publishers Association, welcome to the London Book Fair podcast.
Thank you.
Now, you've been in the role for 5 months. How are you finding it?
I'm enjoying it very much. It's a different world to the recorded music world where I came from, but one thing that's struck me immediately about publishing is the amazing optimism that's around. There's some fantastic companies in all of the areas that the PA works in, on our trade side, our academic side and education side. So it's a very exciting sector at a very exciting time, and I'm really enjoying the challenge.
Now, the music business has been on its knees and Napster is blamed. And of course, publishers have looked to that with mounting horror as to what could happen. What lessons have been learned by publishers from that, do you think?
There's a really strong and obvious similarity, which is that publishing and music both depend upon critically intellectual property and on copyright. And without that copyright, neither businesses would exist. And it's the way that the creators, be that the writers or the musicians, get paid, and it's the way that the companies that invested them, whether that's Universal Music or Random House or HarperCollins, the way that they can invest. So in that respect, they're very similar businesses, and the role of the PA, which is the same as the role that other trade associations in the creative industries have, is to make sure that the intellectual property regime is robust but also flexible to allow the innovation to continue.
Now, obviously, you've talked about the importance of rights management, but do you think publishers are too fixated on DRM, which is not, of course, a subject that the public understands, however important it is to the industry?
I think where the music business is now is in a much better place than where it was 10 years ago or more when the Napster problem arose. And where the music industry is now, which is providing legal services, providing education around copyright, but also being very strong in enforcement, I think is the right stance, and it's the stance that we need to have in the publishing community as well. Now, we're lucky, luckier than music was, in that those legal models are already taking off. We had 4% of revenues from digital in 2009. We're yet to see the 2010 figures. I'm sure they're going to be much bigger. Yeah. And that's testament to the strength of things like Kindle and Apple's work and other e-book providers that are already providing readers with a legal way of getting their publishing content online.
Now, I think it's fair to say, although piracy is a huge issue for publishers globally, it's not a huge issue in the UK, not in the way that it is in the music business. But we do need to make the public understand why intellectual property is important and why rights management matters, don't we?
I think that's true at the moment. And of course, the strategic play is, are we always going to be that fortunate? And can we say to ourselves, well, that's something that happened to music and to film, by the way, which is suffering almost just as badly. And can we sort of complacently sit back and say, well, publishing's going to be fine? Or should we be taking the steps and insuring ourselves against similar risks? And I think it would be wrong if we quit the field on this and convinced ourselves that the legal models were so strong that we won't face large levels of infringement, because that's a very bold gamble. And that's why I'm very keen that the PA is in all the conversations with government around implementation of the Digital Economy Act, and on a European level around enforcement directive, so that our voice is heard around that policy table.
The government pays lip service to intellectual property and to the centrality of the creative economy in the wider economy, but do you think they take it seriously enough?
I think it is taken seriously. I mean, let's not kid ourselves that the creative industries are important, but to a government they are not as important and shouldn't be as important as health and education and pension reform. So I don't mind being down the pecking order in that sense. But what I sort of do object to is when a government might forget that creative industries are approaching 7% of the economy and are the source of so much innovation, the source of so much export revenue.
You're currently responding to the Hardrace review. Are you optimistic about its outcomes? I think they want rapid growth and stronger innovation. Is it possible to reach those goals?
Well, we've got a job to do with Hargreaves' review. He set us a question, he set the whole creative industry's question, which is, what should we do to copyright to improve innovation and growth? And our very strong response back to that has to be, there's a lot of innovation going on, and we're going to have to explain some of that, and there's growth going on. So therefore, Professor Hargreaves, with the greatest respect, the answer is not very much. So we're going to be very strong in our response, and we're working with other bodies in the publishing sector, but also with other creative industry bodies through the Alliance Against IP Theft and the British Copyright Council. And we're all of us of one voice saying, please don't radically change copyright with your fingers crossed, hoping that this is going to drive innovation, because what you'll actually find is you create instability, ambiguity, and that will reduce the level of investment in creative content, and you will see a decline in the vitality of this very important sector.
Are you concerned that Digital Economy Act, libel reform, those sort of issues are in danger of being left behind while the government focuses on the really big picture issues like health and education?
Well, the Digital Economy Act was passed nearly a year ago, and we are still yet to see any of it fully enacted. There's two big hold-ups. One is that two of the telco companies have challenged it in the High Court, but there's a further problem in that some of the measures of the Act are under further review from Ofcom. And there's a big danger of the whole Act falling into the long grass. Now, the big danger of that is, again, to go back to what we were saying earlier, perhaps publishing isn't facing the levels of infringement other sectors are. But for film and television and music, every month that goes by without deterrent action against infringement is another tens of millions of pounds knocked off their revenue. We're promised a draft libel bill very soon, probably in March 2011. And that will go out to consultation, and it's the government's intention to have legislation in place by May 2012. If they stick to that timetable, I think we would welcome that, and all of the measures we think will do what's needed to stop Britain being the libel tourist destination, and to ensure that publishers here aren't constantly afraid of the threat of libel, which we know from a survey the PA has done. All of our members have said at some point or other they have not published something just because they were afraid of the libel, let alone the costs that they incur through libel insurance and through when actions are brought against them.
Now, with the race to cut the deficit, there is a danger that library budgets will be cut, school book budgets will be cut, that book gifting programmes will be cut back, if not cut altogether, so endangering the publishing industry, but more importantly perhaps impoverishing a generation. How can you begin to address that issue?
The imperative here is a moral one, and it's that no modern country should allow its adult or its young populations to suffer low rates of literacy. So that's why publishers are concerned about the future of libraries. Now, we know there have to be cuts. Local authorities have been asked to find something like 28% reductions in their budgets, and no service is going to be entirely immune. But what we are doing at the PA, and we've had parliamentary events on this, and every time I meet with ministers, I raise it, is two things. One, ministers have to give a clear sense of direction. What do they want the future libraries to look like? We need that to come from the centre. But at a local authority level, where these decisions are actually made, those councillors who are sitting in the chambers at this time of year right now deciding their budgets need to be very sure that they're maintaining their legal obligation for a comprehensive and efficient service.
Finally, as we head towards what will be the 40th London Book Fair, and of course your first London Book Fair as Chief Executive, what are your hopes for the show itself, and what are your short-term goals for the industry?
Well, I think I'll be in my 6th or 7th month in the job come London Book Fair, so my aim is to meet all those people I haven't had the opportunity to meet yet in the London publishing world, of whom there are a great many, and to reinforce some of the friendships and the relationships that I've been able to build so far as we can, and the PA is represented on a number of panels throughout the fair, is to keep emphasising these three messages of what the PA is here to do. We're here to ensure that there is respect and value attached to intellectual property. We're here to ensure that government and the wider world know what an important economic sector publishing is, especially in terms of its export work. And we're also about promoting literacy and ensuring that, again, not for a commercial imperative, but for a moral one, that there are high levels of literacy in the British population. And whatever platforms we're on and whatever we're talking about, those three messages I hope will come through.
Richard Mollet, thank you very much.
Thank you.